Gunnar Iron-Eye had never missed a shot in 20 years of warfare. Not in rain, not in darkness, not at impossible distances that other archers claimed were beyond human skill. His bow had ended sieges, changed battle outcomes, and made him the most valuable warrior in 3 kingdoms. But when Jarl Harald ordered him to kill innocent villagers and Gunnar refused, they took his eyes as punishment. What they didn't understand was that perfect aim comes from more than just sight. Gunnar Iron-Eye had earned his name through 20 years of impossible shots that defied every limitation other archers accepted as natural law. While ordinary bowmen struggled to hit targets beyond 50 paces, Gunnar could place arrows precisely where he intended, from distances that made enemies look like dots on the horizon. His reputation was built on moments that became legend throughout the northern kingdoms. During the siege of Ravensholm, he had ended a 3-month standoff with a single arrow that found the enemy commander through a gap in his helmet no wider than a coin. At the Battle of Broken Shields, his shots had turned certain defeat into crushing victory by systematically eliminating enemy officers faster than they could be replaced. But Gunnar's true gift wasn't supernatural. It was the result of obsessive dedication to understanding every aspect of archery as both art and science. He knew how wind affected arrow flight at different temperatures, how rain changed the weight and balance of his projectiles, and how to calculate trajectories that accounted for distance, elevation, and the movement of targets. More importantly, he had developed an almost mystical connection between mind, muscle, and bow that allowed him to shoot by pure instinct when conscious calculation became impossible. His body had learned to adjust for variables his mind couldn't process quickly enough, making him deadly accurate even in conditions that would leave other archers helpless. This combination of technical knowledge and intuitive skill had made him the most sought-after warrior in 3 kingdoms, with jarls competing to secure his services for their most crucial battles. Despite his fearsome reputation, Gunnar followed a strict personal code that distinguished between legitimate warfare and senseless slaughter. He would kill enemy warriors without hesitation, eliminate commanders who threatened his allies, and end sieges that might otherwise cost hundreds of lives. But he refused to target civilians, children, or anyone who posed no genuine military threat. This moral stance had occasionally caused tension with employers who wanted to use his skills for intimidation rather than legitimate combat. But most jarls accepted his limitations, because his effectiveness in actual warfare more than compensated for his refusal to commit atrocities. The crisis came when Jarl Harald Bloodcrown hired Gunnar for what was supposed to be a simple border conflict, but quickly escalated into a campaign of terror designed to force submission through fear rather than military victory. "I want you to kill their children," Harald commanded during a war council, pointing to a map of enemy settlements. "One perfect shot through each village headman's son. Let them understand that resistance brings consequences they cannot protect against." Gunnar's response was immediate and non-negotiable. "I kill warriors in battle, not children in their homes. Find another archer for slaughter. I serve war, not murder." Harald's reaction to Gunnar's refusal revealed the brutal pragmatism that had built his power through intimidation rather than honor. He saw Gunnar's moral code not as admirable principle, but as dangerous defiance that could inspire similar resistance from other warriors. "You forget yourself, archer," Harald snarled, his hand moving to his sword hilt. "I own your service. You shoot what I tell you to shoot when I tell you to shoot it. Your conscience is a luxury I didn't purchase." "My bow serves legitimate warfare," Gunnar replied calmly, though his own hand moved instinctively to his weapon. "Children aren't enemies. Villages aren't battlefields. What you're describing isn't war, it's butchery." The confrontation escalated quickly as Harald realized that Gunnar's reputation for moral consistency was more than mere posturing. The archer genuinely would not compromise his principles, regardless of threats or consequences, making him useless for the terror campaign Harold had planned. "If you won't use your eyes to serve my purposes," Harold declared with cold finality, "then you have no need for eyes at all. Perhaps blindness will teach you the value of obedience." The blinding was carried out publicly to send a message to Harold's other warriors about the consequences of defying orders. Gunnar was held down by 6 men while a red-hot blade was brought toward his face, giving him time to understand exactly what price his moral stance would carry. "Last chance, Archer," Harold offered mockingly. "Agree to shoot whatever targets I choose, and keep your sight. Maintain your precious principles, and lose the gift that made you valuable." Gunnar's response was delivered through gritted teeth, but with unwavering conviction. "Some things are worth more than sight. Some shots aren't worth taking. Do what you must." The destruction of his eyes was swift but thorough, ensuring that he would never again be able to use vision to guide his arrows. Harold's heated blade cauterized the wounds to prevent death from bleeding, leaving Gunnar alive but presumably useless as an archer. As darkness replaced the world he had known, Gunnar felt something unexpected, not despair, but a strange sense of liberation. For 20 years, he had relied on his eyes to judge distance, track movement, and identify targets. Now he would discover what other senses could teach him about the art he had spent his life perfecting. Recovery from the blinding took months, during which Gunnar was left to survive on charity, while Harold's forces continued their campaign of terror against civilian populations. But instead of wallowing in despair, Gunnar used his forced inactivity to explore aspects of archery that vision had previously overshadowed. Without sight to distract him, he became acutely aware of how sound revealed target locations, how air currents carried information about wind direction and strength, and how the feel of his bow could tell him everything he needed to know about arrow trajectory and power. His hearing sharpened to supernatural levels as his brain compensated for lost vision. He could identify footsteps from hundreds of paces away, judge the size and movement speed of targets by the sounds they made, and even estimate distances based on how voices carried through different environments. More importantly, he discovered that his muscle memory contained 20 years of perfect shots that his body could reproduce without conscious guidance. His arms, shoulders, and hands had learned to calculate angles, adjust for wind, and release arrows at precisely the right moment through pure physical instinct. The first sign of Gunnar's adapted abilities came when Harold's tax collectors began dying from arrows that struck them in situations where no sighted archer could have achieved such precision. The shots came from impossible angles, through gaps that couldn't be seen from ground level, and with accuracy that suggested the archer knew exactly where his targets would be before they arrived. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the technical skill involved. It was the moral precision of the targeting. Only Harold's most brutal enforcers died. Ordinary soldiers who showed mercy to civilians were left untouched. Tax collectors who stole food from families were killed, while those who collected only legitimate levies remained safe. The pattern suggested an archer who could not only shoot without sight, but could somehow identify the moral character of his targets without seeing their faces or knowing their histories. This combination of technical impossibility and ethical accuracy created a psychological terror that conventional warfare couldn't match. As reports of mysterious archer attacks multiplied throughout Harold's territory, the Jarl began to suspect that his blinded prisoner had somehow escaped and adapted to his disability. But Gunnar's methods had evolved far beyond simple archery. He had become something closer to a force of nature that struck according to moral laws rather than military objectives. His knowledge of local terrain, gained through years of warfare, allowed him to move through Harold's territory without being detected by patrols that relied on sight to track enemies. His enhanced hearing warned him of ambushes long before they could be sprung, while his understanding of sound propagation let him locate targets from distances that made conventional pursuit impossible. But most importantly, his moral code had transformed from personal limitation into tactical advantage. By targeting only those who deserved death according to his ethical standards, Gunnar created fear among the corrupt while earning protection from ordinary people who saw him as an agent of justice rather than random violence. As his enforcer network crumbled under systematic elimination, Harold realized that blinding Gunnar had created a far more dangerous enemy than the principled archer he had tried to control. The sightless warrior operated according to rules that Harold couldn't predict or counter, striking from positions that sighted guards couldn't watch, and using information sources that conventional intelligence couldn't intercept. Harold's attempts to hunt down his former archer failed because Gunnar had advantages that vision-dependent warriors couldn't match. He moved silently through darkness that blinded his pursuers, struck from concealment that his enhanced hearing had identified long before enemies approached, and escaped through routes that only someone who navigated by sound could follow safely. More psychologically devastating was the realization that Gunnar's accuracy had actually improved since losing his sight. Without visual distractions, his instinctive understanding of physics, wind, and trajectory had achieved perfect expression through muscle memory that 20 years of practice had made flawless. The final confrontation came when Gunnar appeared in Harold's own stronghold, having infiltrated the heavily guarded fortress through routes that sighted sentries had never considered vulnerable. The blind archer's enhanced senses had detected weaknesses in the defenses that visual inspection had missed. Standing in the shadows of Harold's great hall, Gunnar spoke with the calm authority of someone who had spent months planning this moment. "You took my eyes because I wouldn't shoot children. Now learn what happens when moral sight becomes more accurate than physical vision." The arrow that followed struck Harold's sword hand with precision that disabled without killing, demonstrating that Gunnar's accuracy had transcended normal human limitations. But more importantly, it proved that his moral code remained intact. Even in revenge, he chose to wound rather than murder. "I could kill you as easily as I wounded you," Gunnar continued, his voice carrying from darkness that Harold's eyes couldn't penetrate. "But death would be too quick a lesson. Live with the knowledge that moral blindness is more crippling than physical blindness, and that some warriors see more clearly without eyes than others do with perfect vision." Harold's rule crumbled as word spread that his former archer had returned to deliver justice that conventional law couldn't provide. The systematic elimination of corrupt officials created space for more honorable leadership, while demonstrations of impossible accuracy inspired both fear among the wicked and hope among the oppressed. But Gunnar's greatest victory wasn't tactical. It was proving that moral principle could survive any punishment, and that some skills grew stronger when stripped of their apparent prerequisites. His story became legend throughout the northern kingdoms as proof that conscience could be more valuable than sight, and that the truest aim comes from the heart rather than the eyes. The master archer, who had never missed a shot in 20 years of warfare, continued that perfect record even after losing his sight, demonstrating that some talents transcend physical limitations, and that moral clarity provides the most accurate guidance of all. If this tale of ultimate payback moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments which part shocked you the most. Subscribe to Time for Payback for more legendary stories where betrayal meets justice, and don't forget to ring that notification bell, because every betrayal has its reckoning, and every story holds the power to change everything. What revenge story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions below. Until next time, remember, karma never forgets.